Most people believe early success is proof of intelligence, discipline, or destiny. By 30, they expect clarity. By 40, stability. By 50, legacy. And if those milestones don't arrive on time, the conclusion seems obvious. Something went wrong. But Carl Jung saw a very different pattern. In his clinical work, Jung repeatedly encountered individuals who failed early, wandered longer, and matured later. Not because they were weak, but because their psyche was structured differently. These were not people meant for early success. They were people meant for deep success. Jung understood something modern culture still refuses to accept. Not all minds are designed to peak early. Some are built to develop inwardly first. And if that's you, the confusion you've carried wasn't accidental. The delays weren't mistakes. The feeling of being behind wasn't a flaw. It was a signal. A signal that your life cannot be understood using ordinary timelines. By the end of this video, you won't be told how to succeed. You'll understand why your life unfolded the way it did, and what happens if you misinterpret it. Because according to Jung, misunderstanding this pattern doesn't just delay success. It fractures the psyche. And once you see the structure clearly, you can't unsee it. Early success appears harmless, even desirable. It brings praise, clarity, and the reassuring sense that life is unfolding the way it should. Society treats it as evidence of intelligence, discipline, and destiny. By a certain age, progress is expected to be visible. Direction should be fixed. Identity should feel solid. Early success demands adaptation before understanding. It rewards speed over depth, imitation over reflection, and external alignment over inner truth. For many people, this works. Their psyche is flexible, outward-facing, and comfortable absorbing the values of the environment around them. They adopt roles quickly, commit early, and move forward without much internal resistance. Jung discovered that not all psyches function this way. Some individuals possess an unusually active inner world. Their thoughts are layered, their emotions complex, their conscience acutely sensitive to contradiction. These people cannot adapt quickly without psychological cost. When such a person commits too early to a career, belief system, relationship, or identity, the psyche resists. Not loudly, not rebelliously, but quietly and persistently. Motivation weakens. Energy drains. A vague but constant tension appears. From the outside, this looks like laziness, indecision, or fear of commitment. Jung warned that this interpretation is profoundly mistaken. He observed that the psyche will actively sabotage external success if that success threatens inner integrity. This resistance is not failure. It is self-protection. Jung wrote that when the ego builds a life the deeper self does not recognize, the result is neurosis. Anxiety appears without a clear cause. Depression emerges despite outward stability. A subtle but corrosive feeling of living someone else's life takes hold. For certain personalities, the psyche delays success intentionally. It slows life down, creates obstacles. It introduces confusion, not as punishment but as prevention. Prevention of a much more devastating collapse later. Early success requires early identity. You must decide who you are before you truly understand yourself. You must commit to paths before questioning whether they are authentic. Jung saw this as especially dangerous for inward-oriented minds because identity chosen too early becomes a psychological prison. Many people who succeed young build their lives on unexamined assumptions. They inherit ambitions without questioning whether they are their own. They adopt values because they are rewarded, not because they are true. It works sometimes for decades. Then, often in midlife, the unconscious demands attention. Meaning evaporates. Achievement feels hollow. Jung observed this pattern repeatedly. Early achievers collapsing inwardly later, forced to confront questions they postponed when it was easier to keep moving. Those who struggle early confront these questions before success, not after, and that difference changes everything. If you were never meant to succeed early, your psyche likely sensed danger long before you could explain it. You felt resistance where others felt excitement. You hesitated where others rushed. You questioned paths others accepted without thought. This was not indecision. It was discernment without language. Your inner world was too strong to be overridden. Jung believed such individuals undergo an extended developmental phase in which psychic energy turns inward rather than outward. While others build structures in the world, these individuals build structure within themselves. This phase feels unbearable. You feel behind. You feel misunderstood. You feel defective. But Jung would argue the opposite. You were being protected from premature crystallization, from locking into a life that would later destroy you from the inside. Imagine if you had succeeded early. Imagine committing fully before questioning deeply. Imagine building a life that looked impressive but felt false. Jung believed that undoing a false life later is far more painful than delaying success early. Divorce from identity, abandonment of careers, psychological collapse. These are the costs of premature adaptation. Those who bloom late pay the price earlier so they don't pay it later. Confusion instead of collapse. Delay instead of despair. Loneliness instead of inner betrayal. If early success never came easily to you, it may be because your psyche refused to cooperate with false alignment. Not because you lacked ability, ambition, or intelligence, but because you were built for coherence before achievement. Jung believed some lives must be formed slowly or not at all. And if that is your structure, then what felt like failure was restraint. A restraint that quietly saved you from becoming successful at the cost of losing yourself. While it may have looked like nothing was happening on the outside, something demanding and invisible was unfolding within you. Carl Jung believed that when outward progress slows, inward development often accelerates. For certain personalities, life does not move in a straight line. It moves inward first. Energy that others invest in status, recognition, and momentum is redirected into the psyche. This redirection is rarely conscious. It happens as a necessity, not a choice. You were not idling. You were incubating. During this period, your inner world grew louder. Questions emerged that had no immediate answers. Who am I without roles? What part of me is genuine? Which desires are mine and which were inherited? These questions do not produce quick results. And Jung warned that confronting them too early or too deeply isolates a person from the collective rhythm of society. While others appeared to be advancing, you felt suspended. Time seemed to move differently for you. Years passed, yet resolution did not arrive. This creates a particular kind of psychological pain. Not despair, but disorientation. You are moving, but there are no visible markers to prove it. Jung understood that this stage is psychologically expensive. The ego wants certainty. It wants reassurance that effort will be rewarded. But the psyche offers none. Instead, it demands honesty. You begin noticing contradictions others ignore. You sense falseness in paths that appear successful. You feel restless in environments that reward conformity over truth. This is where many people abandon the inward path. They force themselves into acceptable roles simply to relieve the tension. Jung observed that those who do this often feel immediate relief, followed by long-term dissatisfaction. Those who endure the tension without surrender undergo a quieter transformation. The work happening during this period is not intellectual alone. It is emotional and moral. You encounter aspects of yourself you would rather avoid. Doubt, envy, fear, resentment, and inadequacy rise to the surface. Jung called this confrontation with the shadow inevitable for anyone pursuing individuation. Most people delay it. You faced it early, without guidance, without validation, often without language. This is why the period felt so heavy. You were dismantling illusions about yourself and the world while others were still accumulating them. Because this work produces no external rewards, it often feels pointless. You may have wondered why insight did not translate into progress. Why awareness did not bring relief. Jung would say that insight alone is not the goal. Integration is, and integration takes time. The psyche cannot be rushed into coherence. It must be lived through confusion, contradiction, and uncertainty until a deeper order forms on its own. This is why advice rarely helped you. Your process could not be simplified or accelerated. As the years passed, something subtle but important began to change. You became less reactive, less easily impressed, less eager to prove yourself. Situations that once provoked anxiety began to lose their grip. You noticed that your tolerance for superficiality diminished, but your capacity for solitude increased. Jung saw this as a sign that the ego was no longer desperately seeking validation. A different center was forming, one that did not depend on applause or approval to feel real. From the outside, this still looked like delay. But internally, consolidation was occurring. Values were clarifying. Priorities were rearranging themselves. You were no longer searching outwardly with the same urgency. The question shifted from how do I succeed to what kind of life will not fracture me. Jung believed this was the turning point where many late-developing individuals quietly crossed a threshold. They stopped trying to catch up. They began preparing to stand apart. This stage does not feel triumphant. It feels quiet, often lonely, but it carries a strange sense of inevitability. You may not know where you are going, but you begin to trust that movement will resume when alignment is complete. Jung believed that once the psyche finishes its inward work, outward movement returns with surprising force. But unlike early success, this movement is not frantic. It is deliberate. It does not rush to prove anything. It simply unfolds. At a certain point, something begins to feel different, though nothing obvious has changed on the surface. Life may still look quiet, unremarkable, even stagnant to others, but internally the sense of being lost starts to loosen its grip. Carl Jung observed that for individuals who develop inwardly first, there comes a moment when confusion gives way to orientation. Not certainty, not sudden confidence, but a subtle inner alignment. You no longer feel completely at war with time itself. The urgency to catch up fades, replaced by a steadier awareness of direction, even if the destination remains unclear. Jung believed this shift occurs when the psyche finishes a crucial phase of consolidation. The questions that once tormented you do not disappear, but they lose their sharpness. You stop demanding immediate answers. You tolerate ambiguity without panic. This is not resignation. It is psychological maturity. You are no longer trying to force life to move faster than your inner structure can support. Instead, you begin to sense that your timing is not broken, only different. One of the most noticeable changes during this phase is the collapse of comparison. For years, measuring yourself against others may have felt unavoidable. Their progress triggered anxiety, envy, or quiet shame. Jung understood comparison as a symptom of an ego still seeking orientation from the outside. When the inner center strengthens, comparison loses its power. Not because you feel superior, but because other people's timelines no longer feel relevant. Their success does not threaten you. Their failure does not reassure you. You begin to experience your life as a separate psychological system, governed by its own logic. This is also when your relationship with ambition changes. Earlier, ambition may have felt confusing or inconsistent, at times absent, at times intense but directionless. Jung noted that when ambition is not aligned with the self, it either collapses or becomes compulsive. In this stage, ambition becomes quieter but sharper. You no longer want everything. You want what fits. Goals that once tempted you lose their appeal. Opportunities that would have impressed you earlier now feel strangely irrelevant. What begins to matter is not advancement, but coherence. Not recognition, but resonance. People around you may misinterpret this shift. They may think you have become indifferent, withdrawn, or overly selective. In reality, your psyche is no longer willing to expend energy on what does not belong to you. Jung believed that energy conservation is a hallmark of late psychological development. The psyche stops scattering itself across multiple possibilities and begins concentrating. This concentration creates gravity. Your presence changes. You speak less, but when you do, your words carry weight. You react less, but your responses are more precise. You no longer rush to explain yourself. This phase can feel unsettling because it lacks drama. There is no breakthrough moment others can see, no clear milestone to announce. But internally, something decisive has occurred. The ego has relinquished its attempt to control the pace of life. The self has begun to lead. Jung described this as the moment when a person stops living as a collection of reactions and begins living as an integrated whole. You are no longer pulled apart by competing desires and borrowed expectations. Even uncertainty feels different now. It no longer feels like failure. It feels like openness. Another subtle change appears in how you relate to authority and external validation. Praise no longer intoxicates you. Criticism no longer destabilizes you. Jung believed this was one of the most important signs of individuation. When a person's sense of reality is no longer dependent on external confirmation, they become psychologically autonomous. This autonomy is often mistaken for detachment, but it is actually stability. You can engage with the world without being owned by it. This is also why people may begin to respond to you differently, even if they cannot articulate why. Some feel drawn to you, others feel uneasy. Jung noted that individuated individuals often trigger projection. People sense something solid where they feel uncertain. Your calm exposes their inner chaos. Your patience highlights their urgency. This can lead to admiration or resistance, sometimes both at once. Earlier in life you were overlooked. Now you are noticed in a quieter way. If the earlier stages of your life were defined by delay and inward labor, this stage marks the beginning of readiness. Not readiness to rush, but readiness to act without betraying yourself. Jung believed that when this inner alignment is achieved, movement resumes naturally. Opportunities appear that do not require self-denial. Paths open that feel strangely appropriate. Life stops feeling like something you must chase or fix. It begins to feel like something you can finally enter. This is not the peak yet. It is the threshold. And crossing it does not make life easy. It makes it real. Once this inner alignment stabilizes, life begins to move again, but not in the way society expects. Carl Jung observed that for individuals who develop inwardly first, outward momentum returns quietly without spectacle. There is no dramatic turning point, no sudden declaration that life has begun. Instead, action emerges from necessity rather than anxiety. You act because something feels true, not because time is running out. This is a crucial difference. Early success is driven by fear of falling behind. Late, individuated movement is driven by inner coherence. At this stage, decisions become fewer but more decisive. You no longer feel pulled in multiple directions. The noise that once distracted you fades. Jung believed this was a sign that the psyche had stopped leaking energy. Earlier in life, much of your energy was consumed by internal conflict. Doubting yourself, resisting paths that felt wrong, questioning whether you were failing. Now that conflict diminishes, not because you have answers to everything, but because the fundamental question, who am I allowed to be, has been resolved internally. This is where many late developing individuals surprise others. After years of appearing stalled, something solid begins to form. You may commit to work, relationships, or responsibilities with a level of seriousness that seems sudden to outsiders. Jung would argue that nothing about this is sudden. It is the result of long preparation. While others were experimenting outwardly, you were refining inwardly. When you finally commit, you do so with your whole psyche behind you. There is no second guessing, no secret resentment, no sense of self-betrayal. Your relationship to effort changes as well. Earlier, effort may have felt exhausting because it was divided. Part of you wanted progress. Another part resisted the direction progress required. Now effort feels cleaner. Not easier, but cleaner. You are no longer pushing against yourself. Jung believed this alignment is what gives late bloomers unusual endurance. They may start later, but they do not burn out easily. Their energy is conserved, not scattered. This is also when the quality of your work changes. You are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are expressing something that has already been tested internally for years. This gives your actions a different texture. They feel deliberate, economical. Nothing is wasted. Jung observed that individuated individuals often speak less but say more, do less but achieve more. Their actions carry weight because they are not compensatory. They are not attempts to fill a void. They are expressions of an integrated self. At the same time, this phase brings a new challenge. Visibility. After years of being unnoticed or misunderstood, you may find that people begin paying attention. They sense stability where they feel uncertainty. Jung warned that this attention can be unsettling for late bloomers. Old memories of rejection resurface. You may feel reluctant to step forward, even when opportunity aligns. The temptation is to retreat back into invisibility, where it once felt safer. But Jung believed that refusing one's rightful place is also a form of self-betrayal. Individuation does not end in isolation. It demands participation, but on truthful terms. Your relationship to power also shifts here. Earlier in life, power may have felt dangerous or corrupting. You may have associated authority with manipulation or emptiness. Jung noted that this fear often disappears after shadow integration. Because you know your own darkness, you are less likely to be possessed by it. Power no longer needs to be abused or avoided. It becomes a tool rather than an identity. This is why late bloomers often exercise influence quietly. They do not dominate. They stabilize. Another subtle transformation occurs in how you experience time. Urgency dissolves. You are no longer haunted by the sense that life is slipping away. Jung believed this was one of the great rewards of late individuation. While others panic about aging, relevance, or missed chances, you feel an unexpected calm. Your life no longer feels fragmented into before and after. It begins to feel coherent. Past struggles integrate into a narrative that makes sense. Delay is no longer interpreted as failure, but as preparation. This is the stage where many late developing individuals begin contributing meaningfully to others. Not as performers or motivators, but as stabilizing presences. People seek your perspective. They trust your judgment. Jung believed that individuals who undergo deep individuation often become reference points for others, not because they seek that role, but because their inner coherence reorganizes the space around them. If earlier parts of your life were defined by confusion and restraint, this phase is defined by measured movement. You are no longer rushing to become someone. You are allowing what has already formed to express itself. And while this expression may still be quiet, it carries an authority that cannot be faked. Life no longer feels like a test you are failing. It feels like something you are finally ready to inhabit. By the time this stage is reached, something fundamental has already changed. Life no longer feels like a race you are losing or a puzzle you failed to solve. Carl Jung believed that the second half of life is governed by a different psychological law than the first. The first half is about adaptation, survival, and building an ego strong enough to function in the world. The second half is about meaning, integration, and truth. Most people never make this transition. They spend their energy defending identities they chose too early. But those who were never meant to succeed early arrive here prepared. For late developing individuals, the sense of relief can be unexpected. While others grow anxious about aging, relevance, or missed opportunities, you may feel lighter. The pressure to prove yourself dissolves. Ambition loses its compulsive edge. What replaces it is not passivity, but alignment. You are no longer driven by fear of falling behind. You are guided by an inner standard that does not fluctuate with external approval. Jung believed this state produces a rare form of stability. A person who is no longer trying to become someone else cannot easily be shaken. This is why success, when it finally arrives, does not intoxicate you. You do not need it to validate your existence. You are not building your identity on outcomes. Success becomes an expression of who you are, not a compensation for what you lacked. Jung observed that this kind of success does not rot from the inside. There is no hidden emptiness waiting to surface later, because the work that others postpone has already been done. Your life makes sense to you, and that, Jung believed, is the foundation of psychological health. Another transformation occurs here that is easy to miss. You stop fearing judgment, not because you become arrogant or indifferent, but because judgment loses relevance. When your identity no longer depends on external confirmation, criticism cannot destabilize you and praise cannot control you. Jung considered this a sign of true individuation. Such individuals are psychologically difficult to manipulate. They cannot be rushed by fear or bribed by approval. This is also why they often unsettle rigid systems. Their refusal to participate in what feels false exposes weaknesses in structures built on imitation. At this stage, relationships also change. You no longer seek intensity for validation or proximity to avoid loneliness. You seek resonance. Fewer connections, but deeper ones. Jung believed this capacity to endure being misunderstood without becoming bitter marked psychological maturity. Many people fail here. They look back on lost years with resentment. They measure themselves against false timelines and poison their own emergence. Those who succeed reinterpret the past. Delay becomes insulation. Isolation becomes preparation. Struggle becomes structure. The story of your life becomes coherent, not impressive, but true. This coherence gives your presence a quiet authority. People feel it even if they cannot explain it. You are no longer performing or persuading. You are simply expressing what has already been integrated over years of inner work. Jung believed such individuals often become guides without intending to, leaders without titles, mentors without self-promotion. Their influence does not come from force, but from example. In a world driven by speed and surface, coherence stands out. If your life unfolded slowly, painfully, or quietly, it may be because you were never meant to succeed early. You were meant to endure long enough to become whole. Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is not early recognition or constant momentum, but becoming who you truly are without betraying yourself along the way. When that happens, even loss does not destroy you. Even failure does not hollow you out. Your life belongs to you. If this resonated, take a moment to like the video. It helps this kind of work reach people who need it. And if you want to continue exploring Carl Jung's insights into timing, depth, and individuation, subscribe to the channel. These videos are not for everyone. They are for those walking the long path, the quiet path, the one that leads inward before it leads anywhere else.